and sorry, go ahead.
Speaking of morality, one of the reasons why current occupation of Afghanistan is being justified by some people in Afghanistan, actually, and also obviously a quite large amount of people in America and other parts of the world, who are saying that the war in Afghanistan was necessary because we were there to liberate Afghan women. If we weren't in Afghanistan, then there will be no schools. The women would be still punished. This is an often repeated argument, and it is used to justify war and occupation in Afghanistan. But something that I would like to draw to your attention is that I don't know if you're aware of it, but in Fort Hood, there was a soldier. Her name is Vanessa Guillen. She is a Latina, and she disappeared in April. She was a soldier, and she disappeared after she reported sexual harassment at her base. When she disappeared, they didn't launch an investigation, and now, almost, I think 2 months later, they are now saying there may be foul play. So how can an armed force that has certain problems inside its own institution with regards to the way how women are treated, how can this armed force go to another country and civilize those people and save these women? How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, you raise a lot of good points. I'm not familiar with that specific example that you provided. I mean, similarly, in the military, there was a book recently published by a West Point professor named Tim Bakken. It's called The Cost of Loyalty. And he cites in there that female cadets at the service academies, I believe, if I remember the stat correct, are 5 times more likely than ordinary college students to be sexually assaulted. So despite this sort of, lofty ideals of the military, when you actually compare them to sort of ordinary society, it's quite perverse. But regarding the sort of relation to Afghanistan, I mean, let's be clear. Like, I certainly wouldn't want to, if I was a girl, grow up under a Taliban government. So that would not be something I would be advocating for. But I don't think under any circumstances that the United States has a justifiable reason to occupy the people of Afghanistan for 19 years under the basis that we believe that their women are not treated well, unless it's like properly a crime against humanity, which, as I understand it, the treatment is not meeting the criteria according to the UN. And I'm not a legal scholar, so don't hold me to that. But from just a really basic principle, it's very difficult, it seems to me, to say that you're there to protect girls and women when you actually end up killing them in these bombings.
I think there's also a point to be made here, where you mentioned the point precedent earlier, whereby if invading countries due to the record or the attitudes towards women, then there would be a good justification there also to invade the United States, given that both President Trump and Joe Biden have pretty shabby records with regards to how they articulate themselves around women. So I think there's that.
I mean, that's different than systematically saying that girls are not allowed to go to school, for instance.
Of course.
But I mean, the other thing too, right, that I bring up in the book is that, and let's just assume that really the objective of the United States is truly to give girls an education and the freedom that I guess America wants for them. Well, one option is that, you go in and you occupy Afghanistan for 19 years and pay $6.4 trillion. And when I was there, we ended up helping a former Mujahideen warlord basically build a school, a local school. And it was, a contract where he owned the subsidiary construction company. So he's getting paid by U.S. contracts and making a tremendous amount of money in the process. Of course, this is sort of a political and power grabbing tool for him because he can elevate his own status as basically sort of being the superintendent of this small school that he has now helped build. And the long-term value of the school is certainly decidedly limited because these things get blown up or closed, or the teachers walk off and there's no one there to teach. And basically, from the American perspective, you if a vehicle gets blown up, that's $1 million. An injured soldier, according to Harvard Kennedy School, for lifetime costs, including medical treatment and disability, can be up to sort of $2 million per soldier, depending on the type of injuries. Which, of course, by the way, when Americans end up injuring Afghan civilians, there's no such additional disability costs provided to them for their lifetime if they are wrongfully injured or killed. So there's another precedent that's not dealt with. But at the end of this, you build this mud and cinder block school with no toilets or running water. It's infested with some spiders. The teacher shows up occasionally. The quality of education is low. And it uses this power grabbing device for this Mujahideen former warlord. And you end up spending millions of dollars. You add up a couple blown up vehicles, a few injured soldiers, flying fixed wing aircraft is $30,000 to $60,000 per aircraft per hour for an F-16 or an F-18 or an F-35. So when you add up the totals, if you really wanted to provide a good education to girls in Afghanistan, here is a far cheaper option. Buy a used Gulfstream 4 jet. Load those 24 children that would have ordinarily gone to that school onto that jet and fly them to private boarding school in Switzerland or Eton or Andover or Groton or whatever the most prestigious all-girls school is in the world. And in the United States, it's sometimes, there's an academy just down the road in Milton, which is about $60,000 US per child per year. And you could spend, for all of those 24 girls, you could send them to school with room and board and stipend. And you would still have enough left over that you could fill 2 bags, each with $1 million in each. And you could then load them up on the plane, fill the plane with high explosives, and blow it up on the tarmac. And that would be cheaper than building a mud and cinder block school in Afghanistan. And it would provide a far better quality of education. And no one had to die for it.
And this is something that really frustrates me, okay? Whenever I object against foreign occupation, the current government in Afghanistan, the corruption and everything, the first response is often, oh, so you're against women's education, so you don't want women to learn how to read and write. It's like used as a means to label people as against education, against women's rights, when in reality, if we look at the cost of war, at the expenses, and how it actually is implemented in the last 19 years, it's not effective. In all honesty, I am a graduate from School of Governance here in the Netherlands. I know how the government works. I know how much money it costs to do certain things, to provide certain services in a very highly developed country as, let's say, the Netherlands or Denmark. And in a country like Afghanistan, what you described, especially the cost of security, all these armored vehicles, these soldiers, everything, it doesn't make sense. And it's not really progressing. There is no progress in rural Afghanistan. Women's situation in rural Afghanistan has not improved in the last 19 years if you just measure how much money and effort was put into progress. So that's why I would say that as United States and Afghanistan, as two countries who are sadly involved in this conflict with each other, it would make a lot more sense if we spend our efforts, our money, the lives of our people in a much more constructive way, where we don't perpetuate this ongoing conflict where actually right now, if you see in America, a lot of people are going bankrupt. There's so many people who are unemployed, and still there is some sort of lack of awareness of how much money is being wasted in Afghanistan.
I'm glad that like all of your insights are basically that some of the same things that I try to put forth in the book. And America is bankrupting itself by focusing on the wrong priorities. And, you know, if there's two ways to achieve unity, one is through believing that there's some threat that's going to come and hurt you, and therefore you have to unify. And that is, you know, war is inherently expensive and wasteful. The other, of course, is unity through cooperation and say we want to achieve development. America always seems to be picking in recent years, in the post 9/11 years, that we are going to try to achieve unity through, adversary and through threat. And you know, when you think about it in terms of business, and I've been a management consultant, you know, one of the basic things is apply your assets to the things that matter. Like you can spend your money and time and effort on a million different things. Every day, there are different things nagging on you to spend your time on the different items. Well, it makes sense to figure out which ones actually contribute the greatest amount to the development of people and to the well-being of others, and say, okay, we're going to optimize for those things. And the others, yes, we still agree that these are a problem, but we can't fix everything all the time. And overall, we're going to have a much better planet and a much better world, and society will be less filled with conflict and strife if we get these few things right. And I really, really hope that America sort of sees that the same way that we're talking about it right here, and shift our national priorities to more constructive things towards development, not destruction and occupation of other countries.